On a night meant to be forgotten, a mechanic walked into a blind date, never knowing his presence would change everything for a powerful CEO who thought she had lost her smile forever. The restaurant was filled with the low hum of laughter, polished silver clinking against fine china, and the steady murmur of wealthy voices exchanging business promises disguised as casual conversation. Isabel Hartman, the youngest female CEO on Wall Street, sat at the corner table, her wheelchair tucked neatly under the white linen cloth. She'd come reluctantly, agreeing to a blind date her father had arranged, though she suspected it had less to do with romance and more to do with business mergers. Dressed in a tailored black dress that highlighted her elegance, Isabel carried herself with quiet confidence, but inside she felt the familiar weight of dread that always accompanied these setups. Her date arrived late, his arrogance filling the room before he even spoke. He barely glanced at her before muttering, "Didn't know I was signing up for this." The words were sharp, casual, and cruel, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Isabel's chest tightened, but she lifted her chin, refusing to let the sting show. She had lived through whispers and stares before, yet tonight it burned more deeply. Around her, laughter rippled, subtle but undeniable, and the restaurant suddenly felt smaller, suffocating. And then, from across the room, a man in a grease-stained jacket stepped forward. Liam Carter, a local mechanic who had wandered into the wrong place after fixing a delivery van outside, saw what was happening and couldn't ignore it. His voice cut through the smug laughter as he walked toward the table. "Funny," he said calmly, his eyes steady on the arrogant man. "I thought blind dates were about meeting someone, not measuring them." The room fell silent, the cruelty broken by a stranger who had no title, no fortune, but the kind of dignity that couldn't be bought. Isabel's lips curved into the faintest smile, the first in a very long time. The room was still buzzing when Isabel looked up at Liam, her surprise softening into curiosity. Most men either pitied her or avoided her, but this stranger had stood up for her without hesitation, like it was the most natural thing in the world. When the arrogant date stormed out in embarrassment, Liam leaned closer and whispered, "You don't need to stay here a second longer. Let me buy you dinner that doesn't taste like it belongs in a museum." His tone was light, teasing, yet respectful enough that Isabel found herself nodding before she could think twice. Moments later, the polished walls of the restaurant faded behind them, replaced by the glowing neon lights of a quiet New York street. Liam led her to a food truck parked at the corner, where the smell of grilled onions and sizzling beef filled the air. Isabel raised an eyebrow, her lips twitching. "Hot dogs?" she asked, amused. Liam grinned as he handed her one wrapped in foil. "Best in the city. Trust me, they beat overpriced steaks any day." She hesitated at first, but the first bite drew a genuine laugh from her, warm, unrestrained, and startling even to herself. They sat on a nearby bench, sharing food while the city moved around them. Liam didn't look at her like a CEO or a woman bound to a chair. He asked about her favorite books, her childhood memories, the places she dreamed of visiting. In return, he told her about his small garage, the daughter he raised on his own, and the pride he found in simple, honest work. Isabel listened, her guarded heart opening inch by inch. For the first time in years, she felt like someone saw her, not her wealth, not her title, not her wheelchair, but simply her. In the weeks that followed, Isabel found herself waiting for Liam's calls, something she never thought she would admit. He wasn't polished, he didn't quote stock prices or talk about deals over champagne, but he had a way of making the ordinary feel extraordinary. One Saturday afternoon, he invited her to a small-town street fair just outside the city. The air smelled of popcorn and fried dough, children ran with balloons, and music from a local band filled the park. Isabel, dressed simply in a cardigan and jeans, blended in more than she ever had in her tailored gowns. For the first time in years, she laughed freely, watching Liam try and fail to win a stuffed bear at the ring toss before handing her the smallest prize with a grin that made her heart ache in the best way. But not everyone looked at them with kindness. Whispers followed them, some questioning why a woman of her wealth would be with a man who smelled of engine grease, others mocking Liam for daring to stand beside her. Isabel felt the sting of those words, but Liam seemed unbothered, shrugging them off with an ease she admired. Still, Deep inside, she worried how long such a fragile bubble of happiness could survive in a world that thrived on judgment. That evening, as the sun painted the sky in orange and pink, Liam walked her back to his truck and leaned against it, his tone softer than usual. "You know," he said, "people will always have something to say. But life's too short to let them decide who makes you smile." Isabel's breath caught, her heart tightening. She had built an empire, conquered boardrooms, and survived storms that would have broken others. But sitting there with Liam, she realized she was facing her greatest challenge yet, letting herself believe she deserved this kind of love. Happiness, however, has a way of drawing shadows. Isabel's father, a man whose empire stretched across banks and boardrooms, soon learned of her growing closeness with Liam. To him it was not love, it was a liability. One late evening, Liam arrived at his garage to find a sleek black car waiting outside. Inside sat Isabel's father, his voice calm but cold as he laid out the terms. "You've had your fun, but my daughter belongs in a world you'll never touch. Walk away now, or I'll make sure both of you regret it." The words were heavy, edged with power, and Liam, for the first time, felt the weight of how impossible their worlds truly seemed. The next day, Isabel waited for his call, her heart leaping at every sound from her phone, but silence stretched on. When she finally saw him, it was only for him to offer a strained smile, his eyes clouded with something she didn't understand. "You deserve better, Isabel," he said softly. "Better than me." Before she could argue, before she could remind him that he was the only man who ever saw her as more than a wheelchair and a title, he was gone. Days turned into weeks, and the laughter they had shared faded into a hollow ache. Isabel threw herself back into work, her polished image intact, but inside she felt more broken than she had in years. One stormy night, caught in the rain after leaving a late meeting, her chair slipped on the slick pavement, and as panic set in, a familiar voice cut through the downpour. "Hold on, I've got you." She looked up through the rain, her breath catching as Liam knelt beside her, drenched but determined. He hadn't stopped loving her, he had only tried to protect her, and in that moment the truth poured out, heavier than the storm around them. The rain-soaked night became the turning point. Isabel, trembling and drenched, refused to let Liam slip away again. "If you think I care about wealth, about boardrooms, about what anyone says, you're wrong," she whispered, her voice breaking but steady with conviction. "All I ever wanted was someone who saw me for me. And that's you, Liam." Her eyes, fierce and unyielding, left him unable to hide behind silence any longer. He finally confessed everything, how her father's threats had pushed him away, how he believed walking out was the only way to keep her safe. But Isabel, holding his hand tight, made it clear that no amount of money or power could dictate her heart. The very next day, she rolled into a boardroom filled with her father's closest allies. All eyes turned as she spoke, her voice calm but resonant. "You've spent years deciding my life for me, Father. But not this time. Liam is the man I love, and I won't let fear or pride tear that away." The room was stunned, her father speechless for the first time in decades. In that moment, Isabel showed them all that strength wasn't measured in balance sheets or empires, but in the courage to claim her own happiness. Weeks later, in a small garden behind Liam's garage, Isabel and Liam shared their vows quietly, away from flashing cameras and corporate gossip. Sophie, her loyal assistant, clapped with joy, while a handful of true friends cheered. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Liam whispered, "You gave me a reason to believe again." Isabel smiled, tears glistening. "And you gave me back my heart." For the first time, she no longer felt trapped by her chair or her father's shadow. She was free, and with Liam by her side, she knew she would never feel alone again. Love, like Isabel and Liam's, reminds us that true strength comes from choosing the heart over fear. If this story touched you, don't leave without sharing your thoughts below. I'd love to know where you're watching from. Make sure to like, subscribe, and stay with us for more emotional millionaire romance stories that inspire and move hearts.